views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is the program that we have had since, a year and a half already. And we talk with Bronx journalists, Bronx editors, and find out what they're thinking about, what they're writing about, and you get to kind of get an idea what's going on behind the scenes at the various publications or internet sites that you interact with. Today, I am thrilled because we're going high end. We have two editors with us. The editor of the assignment editor of the Bronx Times, he wants me to be clear about that, is Patrick Rocchio. Nice to have you back on the show, Patrick.
Nice to be here.
And he is the editor of the Riverdale Press, and it is Michael Hinman. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you so
Michael.
much for having me back.
Always good to have you. Michael, let's start with you, because you're the new kid on the block. Relatively so,
I'll
Patrick.
always be the new kid on the block, apparently.
Well, I don't know. Stick around. Compared to that guy, probably. But so how's it going? I mean, as I communicated to you, and I think the case is with both the papers are in great shape. I enjoy reading them. I'm sure people enjoy reading them. Tell me, just how's it going? Give me a feel for what's going on at the Riverdale Press.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's one of those things where we're in the Bronx, and there's never a shortage of news. That's always like the thing that I like about this the most, is that we can get out there, and every single week I'm so excited to hear about what's happening next, and just so many things. And it's because we're in a very passionate community, I think. And it's not just Riverdale or Kingsbridge, but it's all of the Bronx. It's great, just the energy and everything. And the energy that's great for journalists, because we could tap into that, and it makes our jobs a lot easier. So it's been a lot of fun so far.
My reaction to that is one to bounce it off a guy who's been here for a while. Patrick, it's nice to hear. It's nice to hear somebody coming in. It's almost like giving an objective look at what we have known. I mean, this is a pretty interesting time to be reporting and writing and talking about the Bronx.
Sure, Gary. There's a lot going on, and this summer in particular has been very, very busy compared to previous summers where there's a bit of a lull sometimes. Mm-hmm. Not this summer.
We were talking about it slightly before the show. The whole idea of the mayor's shelter plans and various developments, and in both cases, you wrote about 5731 Broadway. You've written about 2800 Bruckner. Let's start with you then on this. Talk to me about 2800 Bruckner. What happened? What is happening? And what do you think ultimately could happen?
Okay, so
because nobody knows what will happen.
Right. Well, 2800 Bruckner is a bit of a mystery still. It definitely.
And then, by the way, that's on the front page of the Bronx Times this week.
And yes, indeed. And so it's a bit of a mystery. It's definitely not going to be a homeless shelter, which is what people were concerned about at first. But the person who is either the new owner or the new co-owner is not being very clear on what he intends to do, and is evicting all of the commercial tenants. And apparently for the past 20 years, excuse me, since the building has been opened, a lot of the tenants were for-profit companies, and the certificate of occupancy doesn't allow for that.
Really?
So they've been.
I wasn't even aware of that. Yeah. That's unbelievable. You know what is underscored, and I'm sure Michael heard the same thing as an editor. You listen for when you said he might be the owner. We're not sure. That already puts a big cloud, and it makes it very difficult for a reporter to even do a good story, because there's a big cloud over it. This whole idea that they were going to run some kind of detox center, is that still on the table, or that's not on the table?
Uh, Based on my conversation and email with the owner, he's being very vague as to what he intends to do, other than being a wellness center. Though other wellness centers do have detox facilities in them.
You know, if there is a detox facility and you have people coming through, you know, who may have some difficulties, if the thing is secured right, I mean, is that a big issue, or are people just? And I know Michael wants to weigh in on this because he wrote a very strong editorial about it, about this kind of a thing. But you know, shouldn't communities especially right now, we have an opiate problem and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, there are serious issues there. With opioids and things like that. But I think in this particular case, the community, which is mostly homeowners around, so it's mostly residential community with a school across the street. They are just not happy about this plan, or what could come there, and I think they just really, there's just too much wrong with this particular location. There's evictions of people who have signed leases that may possibly be in a building that they shouldn't have never signed a lease in. There is a developer who is known for producing housing, supportive housing. There were beds, according to the
I think one of the
moved in.
reports, I'm sorry if I don't remember if it was your paper or somewhere else,
Right.
but there were reports that there were beds available, or beds being ready to be moved in.
Beds were moved into the parking lot.
I'll just add, it's not a little building. It's not like a little shack. This is a huge structure that takes up a lot of space.
Quite big.
Well, I'm going to bring Michael back into the conversation because one of the main things that I'm hearing from Patrick, and I've certainly read and we all know, is the big question marks, that the community doesn't know what's going to happen. In the case of 5731 Broadway, to me, the biggest thing is that there was like a little bait and switch. We're going to build market rate housing. Okay, that's a nice project. We're going to deal with that. But then all of a sudden, by the way, it's not going to be market rate housing. To me, that's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely one of the issues that when people bring that issue up, that's a key issue, because the developer came in and said, hey, market rate housing, over and over again. The community board asked over and over again, and that's the answers they got back. And now that it's switching over to the homeless shelter, if that's what happens, if the contract gets approved, but the thing is that where's the big difference? Outside, there's going to be a staff there, probably be a little more security than what you would get in a typical apartment building. But these aren't, these are people who were homeless because now they have homes. Now they're in a home. They're trying to, stabilize themselves. They're trying to become become productive members of the community again. And so, but it kind of goes back to like where we were talking about before, like if it was like a detox center or something, I mean, those are normally people who are staying in their rooms the whole time. They don't walk outside. They don't go anywhere. Usually a detax facility, so how I would think the one would be, is that you're kind of confined to a room. So how would that affect a community anyway?
You have already started to skirt on the editorial that you wrote, which was passionate. And I'm guessing people in the northwestern part of the Bronx took you to task over it, but you were pretty strong about, you know what, these are people who need homes. There's no reason why they can't be there. We don't believe, or there's a way to keep everybody secure. Why not? So why don't you recount what you wrote, and then let's bring it up to date.
Well, the belief, and what you keep hearing over and over again, and some of it's legitimate beliefs, that homeless people are usually, they're on drugs, there's been some form, they're alcoholics, mental illness, but in reality, a good portion of people who are homeless are people who simply couldn't afford rent anymore. They had something happen where they're living paycheck to paycheck, suddenly lost their job, or had a reduction in hours, were barely getting by, lose your apartment. And, it's just, I just got an apartment finally. It cost me almost $10,000 to get it going. I mean, it's expensive.
You're saying that literally, you just got an apartment.
Yeah, literally.
No,
and it was,
okay.
and it's tough because it's tough to get by that way. It's not to say that there aren't bad people that are homeless that are doing things they shouldn't be doing. But when people bring up the fact that, oh, well, I don't want people begging on the train and stuff, that's not the kind of people that are being brought in. These aren't people, they act like they're in a shelter, they're coming in late at night, getting a bed and leaving first thing in the morning. It's like, no, they're going to be just like the rest of us, living in an apartment.
And maybe just have had some bad luck or something happened,
and trying to
they
get
got
back on their
foreclosed, or they were burned out, or it could have been a husband and wife and they split up and all of a sudden the wife was left with the child. But I just wanted to add, in this day and age and what you hear about in the city, I think I just read a story in the Times that said that something like 10,000 children in school district 10, I think it was, are in the shelter system. That means that there are mothers and families, and goodness gracious, those people would like a nice place to live. Yeah. But let's go back. Stag Development, that put it together, has a track record of doing this, telling it's going to be one thing and changing. To me, that's where the problem is.
Yeah, Stag isn't helping themselves at all with this.
No, did you talk to them? Or
hopefully they'll talk to me, with this latest stuff we're working on.
Yeah.
We're working on a few other things right now, and hopefully they'll talk about it. But no, they're not doing themselves any favors. And I covered real estate for a long time in Florida. I mean, that was like my specialty outside of government was real estate. And developers, more often than not, shoot themselves in the foot, and that's why they have a bad reputation. That's why, they're below used car salesmen and below journalists. So, I mean,
even below journalists.
And they're not doing themselves any favors with some of the stuff, especially with the fact that, for what was supposed to be market rate apartments, they're charging taxpayers an average of $2,200 a month for each one of these units. And they're claiming in a new tax abatement form they just filed that they were going to charge as much as $3,500 a month, which is crazy. I mean, that's insane. There's nothing even comparable to it in that market.
Patrick, there's not a neighborhood in the city of New York right now that is not seeing the effects of homelessness. We've got more than 60,000 people who are on the list of being homeless. There's probably many more who haven't been counted. What do you hear from residents? Because I know what I read in all the papers is that, it's kind of like not in my neighborhood. Not in my backyard.
Well, that may not be too far from the truth. Particularly among the homeowning communities that I cover a lot in the eastern part of the Bronx, there's a real concern. And I think a lot of it may be economical, where this is a person's entire life savings. In some cases, maybe the only large asset that they own.
Meaning their property.
Meaning their house. Yeah.
Right. And so what they're worried about is that
right.
Listen, I'm not against them. And then the other thing, and I'll ask you, and then we're going to take a short break, and we'll get into some of the other stories that are in the papers. But it's just every neighborhood is talking about it. The mayor's shelter plan requires that neighborhoods are going to have to bite some kind of bullet. People in the Bronx feel like, we've been getting more than our fair share of the burden. And I know you have really deep thoughts about that. Why don't you talk a little bit about what your
I guess from how I understand the plan is that the idea is to try to return families from the community board areas that they had their last known permanent address to. The question is really how many of those families are actually happening. There's a couple of reports that are floating out there right now that show, for instance, like we're talking about 83 families coming back to Community Board 8, which is where our paper is, but that, somebody pointed out that they saw that only 44 families from this area qualify. So where are the other 40 coming from?
Somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's the question. Like, are they actually? Because I think it's great to return people back to their homes, to their families, to their schools. But is that actually happening?
And what for me is a really important part of this, and it gets so overlooked. They talk about the number of children who are in transition who don't have a place to go. And so then if you keep moving them from neighborhood to neighborhood, regardless if it's their original neighborhood or not, they're not going to do well in school. I can guarantee you that. The attendance is going to be down. The school is going to have a problem. So anyway, okay, Michael Hinman, editor of the Riverdale Press, assignment editor from the Bronx Times Reporter, Patrick Rocchio is here. They, and me, and you will take a break, and then they and me and you will come right back. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, Me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family?
This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything.
Oh, sorry. Go along, son!
it's always worth it.
Whoa! Master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Oh my God, go! Oh, Shane, look out!
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. It is Patrick Riocchio from the Bronx Times and Michael Hinman from the Riverdale Press. We'll start with Patrick about, I'm going through the papers. I love to do this with the guys who actually wrote the stories. Patrick, you wrote about the 13th Congressional District. As many viewers know, a council district, I'm sorry. As many viewers know, we did the debate. I moderated the debate on BronxNet, on Bronx Talk this week. But two of the candidates who had been on the ballot were knocked off the ballot, and you wrote a story about that. One of them, and the late breaking news, is one of them, Victor Ortiz, just today was put back on the ballot. Just give me your perspective. You made the point of saying it was two Latino candidates. That is a bit of a factor in this whole thing. Why don't you give us some perspective?
Okay, so Victor Ortiz and Alex Gomez were candidates, one is still a candidate in the 13th district for the Democratic primary. And they had received a challenge from somebody named Rebecca Chant, who turned out to be, who they believe, let me just say this, because I don't know Rebecca Chant. They believe that she was an intern who worked on Marjorie Velasquez's campaign. Mm-hmm. And apparently filed a objection to their petitions to get on the ballot.
Right.
So that being the case, apparently she is a student at a college in Ohio and resides in New Jersey. Now, I don't know if she resided in the Bronx for a short period of time.
And so it just seems incredibly odd that she would be challenging the petitions of, like, what is her interest in this?
Right.
And I can tell you, to partially bring it up to date, we asked Ms. Velasquez about the idea of throwing them off the ballot. We didn't get into the details of the relationship with this person. If Ms. Velasquez wanted to challenge petitions, why have it, and there is a relationship here, why go through that route? Why not just have your own attorney or some local, and have it handled within house? Why, something here doesn't smell right.
Well, I think that's a common procedure in a lot of these challenges.
The challenging, or to bring somebody in just arbitrarily, or who would appear to be arbitrarily?
I've never seen anyone come in from that far away.
Yeah, me neither. That's what I mean.
and challenge somebody. So both candidates pointed to Marjorie. There was.
She basically acknowledged it during the debate that her campaign was involved.
Right. I mean, Victor Ortiz believes that this woman, Rebecca Chant, was a paid intern, not from the Velasquez campaign. She was paid through her college. And on her Facebook page, there is a call for petitions, signatures, or petition gatherers.
Yeah, listen, I've been sitting in this seat and the one on Bronx Talk for many years, and we've seen all kinds of challenges and things that have gone on, but never in this way. I wanted to just bring up that Alex Gomez was, to my mind, the first announced candidate in this race a year ago, maybe even further back, and it just seems a shame from a procedural point of view that he's not even going to make it to the ballot after a year and a half of campaigning, and campaigning very passionately. But on the other hand, and I editorialized about this during the debate, you got to have a process, and if that's the process, you got to have good signatures. Michael, let's talk with you about one of the front page stories. You didn't write it because you are the editor. And I don't know how much writing you actually do.
I do some.
This idea of how to fix this is all. It's over here, folks. On press of how to fix the MTA, and Assemblyman Dinowitz, who you cover extensively, says that he's got a tax plan that will fund the MTA. Now we know that de Blasio came out and with something that probably he could never make stick and say that it was going to be people making over a certain amount of money. The governor has his own plan. Now Jeff Dinowitz says he has a plan. Give me some evaluation of whether this is reality.
And I think probably the bigger plan that it probably still has no chance because it'd have to go through the Assembly and through the Senate. It's just not going to happen. Is I think that everybody kind of would really love to bring back the commuter tax, which is the tax of everybody who works in the city but lives outside the city, and it's just kind of an income tax that helped fund the MTA for many, many years, and then it went away, and then it's never going to come back because you have most of your assembly, most of your senators outside the city, and they don't want to add a tax to their own people that that's not being taxed downstate. So. I don't know. I mean, they have to find something. They have to find funding for this. And until the governor and the mayor decide to get together and figure out exactly what they're doing.
Well, good luck on that.
I mean, don't hold your breath. But still, it's just, I mean, but it is going to have to be a new tax somewhere. And you just have to find where that money's coming from, because it doesn't make any sense if you raise fares again. I mean, it's already starting to get high. And I'm a big proponent of mass fares. I take it all the time.
And you led right into my next thing. Was something you did write was the editorial that's in the paper this week, and it's entitled "Forget Buses, Trains, and Cars. We Need Bicycles in the Bronx." I happen to ride a bike. I used to ride it when I had a little bit of a closer commute, so I'd ride it in that way. Is it realistic to think that in the Bronx, now I'm not talking about Manhattan, which has a much more grid-like streets than we have, is it realistic to think in the Bronx that we could put enough bicycles on the street to impact some of our transportation woes?
I mean, it would be nice if we could, but the problem is that just like where we had issues with Broadway, where DOT wanted to come in and kind of do some traffic calming, add some bike lanes, and the idea is that the mentality is that bicycles are recreational, that they're not a mode of transportation, because the common refrain is, well, if you want to ride a bike, go ride in Van Cortlandt Park. Well, sure. I mean, nobody says that about driving a car. Like, if you want to drive a car, go drive it in the park. I mean, it's supposed to be a way. Like, I know you can't tell by how great shape I'm in, but I used to bike 40 miles a day. I love cycling, and I wish I could cycle to work. And it's just, but it's still dangerous. I mean, I don't know if I want to do it without getting killed.
I'll tell you the honest truth is that I try to do a lot of recreational biking now, but I try to do it on Saturday and Sunday mornings, because if I go afterwards, number one, the streets aren't in great shape. And you really know that when you're a bicycle rider. And number two, it's tough out there for bike riders. Any thoughts, by the way, before we leave the idea of transportation, on what's going to happen on Broadway and the remodeling of Upper Broadway?
Well, I mean, DOT had their plan. The community board said absolutely not, and they threw a bunch of ideas. Some of them were good.
And that included a bike lane.
That included, protected bike lane. Yeah. But the thing is that, I mean, Broadway is very wide at that stretch. And it's weird because on either side of Broadway, like, once you get the north side and the south side of that stretch, it's very narrow. There's not a lot of ways to go. But, like, right there, it's like a freeway. It's like being on the interstate. And people drive like it's the interstate.
Yes.
It's fast, and it's a long walk from one side to cross over to Van Cortlandt Park.
So
I mean, you're really taking your life in your hands by doing that.
That's right, because somebody runs a light, or they're going faster than you realize, and
Yeah.
then you could, and it has happened, unfortunately.
I'd rather cross the freeway sometimes than that, you know.
You know what? Do me a favor, don't do it. Patrick, I was not aware of Antonia Vasquez. You talked about the naming of a street named after a trailblazer. Tell me who Antonia Vasquez is and what street was renamed.
Okay, so a portion of Davidson Avenue near the Davidson Community Center was renamed for the founder of that center.
Oh, that's who it is.
Who was Antonia Vasquez. I think it's a corner near where it was founded. And she founded it in 1965. I think it was incorporated in 1968, if I'm correct. And she was really someone who stood by that community when it was going through a lot of turmoil in the 1970s and 1980s, and forged relationships with, I think, Mayor Beam and Koch to try to bring in programming for the community to build it up a little bit and eventually develop affordable housing.
My reaction to that is, and honestly and earnestly, even though it'll sound flippant, that's nice. That's a nice thing to do, and it preserves some of the legacy and history that's so important in the Bronx. Almost out of time, I wanted to mention you have a new reporter. Talk about Bob Giuliano.
Oh, right, Bob.
Who we're reading. Oh, right.
Oh, right.
I won't tell him you said it in that way.
Oh, no. Bob. Okay, so Bob is a reporter
You got
with
about
a
30
lot of
seconds,
experience. He has been at daily papers. He worked out west. He brings kind of a wealth of experience and knowledge to the paper. I think he's a great addition. He has an investigative reporting background.
Great.
Which
All right, we're gonna have to move out. I will tell you that he really joins what I think is as good a staff as the Bronx Times has ever had. And I've been reading it every week all these years. So a great job and great work, certainly, in bringing good reporters.
After the Riverdale Press,
and
right?
For you, that's right. For you kind of added a reporter because Anthony Capote is now back. Right?
Yeah, he's
he
back.
was away, and he, I guess, kind of took a little vacation.
And we had
but now he's back.
great help from Alexandra Hutzler while he was gone, and she was wonderful.
And this was an intern.
Well, no, she's a student. She studied over at Manhattan College, but we hired her over the summer. She was absolutely wonderful.
Great.
I told Tony he didn't have to come back, but he did.
I also won't tell him that you said that. Anything coming up in the papers, or just more of the same every week? Right?
More new stuff every week.
New stuff every week.
Never the same.
Hey, Michael Hinman from the Riverdale Press, Patrick Rocchio from the Bronx Times Reporter. Both of you say hello to all my friends at those papers, and thank you for joining us tonight. And guess what? We're done here. We will see you Monday for Bronx Talk, and we'll have the debate in the 18th Council District. We'll do that Democratic primary debate Monday night on Bronx Talk. Good night.
Oh my God, go!